Well, Oklahoma's search for a new defensive coordinator did not last long, approximately 3 or 4 hours by my count. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Eli Letterman, sellout crowds coverage team, part of the coverage team for Oklahoma football. And Eli, we were here just not long ago talking about Oklahoma parting ways with Ted Roof. What was the next steps? Well, multiple outlets now reporting that the next step is to hire Zac Alley, 29 years old, defensive coordinator at Jacksonville State, but a guy that's got deep connections to Brent Venables. Who is this guy? Just kind of give us the rundown of who Zac Alley even is.
Well, first, I'm going to start you with a little trivia question, Jenny. How old do you think, or do you know, Brent Venables was when he was appointed the defensive coordinator of the Oklahoma Sooners?
I don't believe he was 29, but I'm going to say 35.
If I have my math or my numbers right or my facts right, he was 28.
What? Oh my gosh. Wow.
So there you go, more circularity. Well, it's not where the connections end between Zac Alley and Brent Venables because Brent Venables was there for really the early years of Zac Alley's coaching career. Zac Alley has maintained connection with Brent Venables, kept him as a mentor, and now he will be his defensive coordinator, taking the Sooners into the SEC. So it started for these two. Zac Alley went to Clemson. He's from Charlotte. Went to Clemson, became a student assistant with Clemson in 2011. To be the year before Brent Venables arrived. Was in that role till 2014. Spent another 4 years as a grad assistant before heading out to Boise State, and then spending the last 3 years as a defensive coordinator, first at Louisiana Monroe, and then the last two at Jacksonville State, where he really developed some pretty incredible defenses if you look at the numbers. But that's the story. That's all there is on the resume because, as we say, Zac Alley's a young guy. And the Sooners now have a young, bright, Brent Venables connected defensive coordinator expected to be headed to Norman.
Yeah, and if Brent Venables was hired at 28, Zac Alley got his first defensive coordinator job at 27. So he one-upped his
There you go.
upcoming boss. But he is definitely on the younger side, although Oklahoma has had some young coaches. I mean, Lincoln Riley came in as a young coach, was a very young head coach. So what do you, I mean, obviously we're still gathering a lot of information right now, but what's your sense of, here's a guy who spent multiple years with Brent Venables. What is Oklahoma getting in Zac Alley as its defensive coordinator?
Well, shoot, there's probably going to be people who see 29-year-old from Jacksonville State and wonder what the Sooners are doing. You mentioned Lincoln Riley. What did people think when there was a 31-year-old guy coming from East Carolina?
Yeah.
So there you go. You can be, young in this profession and certainly make an impact. And that's what the Sooners will hope for Zac Alley. And to this point, he's done that. So again, the last 3 years, the time he spent as a coordinator, he got hired at Louisiana Monroe in 2021, then was at Jacksonville State in 2022. And this past season with Jacksonville State, his defenses are impressive for kind of where he was coaching and the level and whatnot. I mean, they finished, got it not in front of me anymore, but 15th in run defense, 33rd in scoring defense, 43rd in total defense. Those are, impressive numbers, and they were defenses that drew a lot of praise. They played South Carolina this past year, and Shane Beamer and the staff there was really impressed with how multiple they were, how all the different looks they could throw. So these all sound like things that would be music to Brent Venables' ears, and then you realize they're connected, and it makes sense why where Zac Alley has come from and where his defensive mind has been developed.
We were sitting in these same seats not very many hours ago talking about how Ted Roof was a good fit to be defensive coordinator alongside Brent Venables because as an older guy, he was able to sort of put the ego to the side. If Brent Venables changed a call, if he had a scheme, if he decided something about this defense, is this sort of the younger version of Ted Roof? And just in terms of, here's a younger guy who has worked alongside Brent Venables, who obviously knows what he's about, is rejoining him. And, like we've talked, this isn't going to be a retool of the defense. They're going to continue to run Brent Venables' defense. But is this the type of guy that on the younger side can come in and can learn a lot, have some input, but really be a sidekick to Brent Venables and what he's already established?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the opposite end of the spectrum. And in Ted Roof, you had someone who'd been around and probably wasn't, I mean, maybe he was, but, wasn't looking to get that next job or needing this to be his audition. Zac Alley, I'm sure, has aspirations in this profession and few good years at Oklahoma and he can have any job he wants. But yeah, this is a fit because this is someone who's worked with Venables before. He is young. He's certainly got a lot to learn, but at the same time, he's proven, I think, himself capable, really, of running his own defense. And I think Brent Venables will let him do that. We'll see, what the talk is when we hear from them. Who's going to call plays? Who's going to do this, do that? But ultimately, I think one thing Brent Venables needs is a coordinator who can take a lot of that burden away from him. Brent Venables has enough on his plate being a head coach, and we know, OU fans been talking about game management for 2 years. He needs a coordinator who can truly do that job and take some of that off his plate. And you would guess, based on this hire, that he believes Zac Alley can be that guy.
Well, obviously, we've got lots of questions, and we'll start to get answers as Zac Alley is formally introduced, as he arrives on campus. But Eli, lastly, before we get out of here, what's sort of top of your head curiosity about all of this? Because this moved really fast. You got to think that this was already the plan, maybe, when there was that talk when Ted Roof's departure was announced that he was offered a different spot. So I'm guessing that maybe this was already well down the tracks to bring Zac Alley in. But what's top of your head curiosity as we move forward and get to know a little bit more how this is going to look like, what Zac Alley is like, just all those sorts of things?
Well, the one thing I'd be curious about is from a recruiting perspective. Zac Alley's got roots across the South. I think that helps. But I guess it's as much about the coach as it is the person. I'm really intrigued. Eventually we'll get in front of Zac Alley. We'll get to talk to him. We'll all get to tell his story and learn more about him. But I'll be curious. 29 years old, stepping into a big job. What is his demeanor like? What is his presence like? What do the players think about him? If you watch clips, there's a quote out there in a Post and Courier story that's been circulating tonight, where he says, I walk like Brent Venables, I talk like Brent Venables. He even needs a get back coach like Brent Venables used to at Clemson. So we may just have a Brent Venables clone. Again, I think another thing Zac Alley himself has referred to himself as stepping in as the Sooners defensive coordinator. And if that is not music to your ears as a Sooners fan, I don't know what would be. So a lot to learn. It'll be a lot of fun to see this introduction for Zac Alley up ahead.
Yeah, and it's definitely interesting to note that during his time at Clemson, Clemson had some of the best teams in the country, won national championships, and so he knows what it takes to play great defense as the Sooners head into the SEC. We'll see how that all meshes. Lots more questions to answer as this story evolves. Eli will have it all covered. We'll have it all covered at Sellout Crowd, so be sure to follow us. And a big thanks to our sponsor, Oklahoma Ford Dealers. Thanks for all they do, and thanks for being here as we talk about this evolving story. Oklahoma now has its new defensive coordinator, Zac Alley.